Support for Donnybrook is provided in part by Design Air Heating and Cooling.
Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Live from the Sheldon Concert Hall in Grand Center, this is Donnybash.
The Sheldon for our annual fundraiser for 9PBS. Wow, thank you so much for joining us, whether at home or here in person. Let's meet the panelists, starting with the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese. Along with one of our founders of Donnybrook way back in 1987. Give it up, folks, for Bill McClellan. Also from STLtoday.com and the Post-Dispatch, Joe Holleman. From the St. Louis American in sartorial splendor, Mr. Alvin Reid. And from St. Louis Magazine and the 314 podcast, we welcome Sarah Fenske. Hey, you know, we do have, before we begin, Donnybash, we do have a rotating art exhibit here on the set of 9PBS. And this month, we want to thank very much Chandan Mahanta, who is a great local artist. You can find his work on his Facebook page. But behind me, above the mantle, you'll see his creation, which he shared for all of PBS. So thank you very much, Mr. Mahanta.
That's called Donnybrook hot air, right there.
Called Design Air. Hey, Bill McClellan, we have a new pope, and he is from your native Chicago. Pope. He will be known as Leo the 14th.
Right. Well, the first question was he a Sox fan or a Cub fan? And the New York Times said he was a Sox fan, and I think that's fake news. Just the name Pope Leo, clearly referring to Leo DeRocher. I suspect he wanted to be Pope Ernie. But they said no, there's no precedent for that. No Pope Rhino, so he went with Pope Leo. But it's nice to have a Cub fan in the Vatican.
Yes.
So.
At least they win at something. Sarah Fenske, there is a local connection between Leo the 14th and St. Louis.
Yeah, they call St. Louis the Rome of the West, or maybe some people call St. Louis the Rome of the West. And so we were eagerly looking into, is there a St. Louis connection for this first American Pope? And yes, he was a novitiate here, in a novitiate here for a year. So when he got his training to be a priest, it was actually with the Order of Augustine, and he did that. He served in Compton Heights, my own neighborhood. So, yes.
Wow.
So.
Does that mean that we have a designated high school that we can it sounds like it.
I've heard from every Augustinian graduate. Is there any doggies out here? Wow.
This is a big day.
Augustinian High School, affectionately known as Augie Doggies, the guys who went there. Greg Daly, the collector of revenue, is a former Augustinian. The late Tom Villa, whose wife is here this evening.
And sister.
Taught at Augustinian, I believe. So, there's a lot of Augustinian folks around.
Big night.
Yeah, you did mention Karen Villa, whose husband, Tom Villa, was one of the great members of the General Assembly, and he was also on he was the board president for the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, and his sister Jane, both in the House. And boy, we sure miss Tom. Thank you so much.
We do indeed.
Okay. Sarah, maybe I'll get back to you because you did report this week that the Times of London actually visited St. Louis, and they found that St. Louis is a really good place to visit. And at the same time, Joe Schlafly, the attorney who lives in the Central West End and started Arch Grants, he worked for Stiefel for many years, He is a big booster of St. Louis, but he said this week that the Times of London praised us, he said, St. Louisans basically are the most self-deprecating and self-abusing group I've ever met. We never brag about our city. Do you think there's a kernel of truth to that?
I think there is a kernel of truth to that, and it honestly drives me a little bit crazy. As a transplant to this city, I came in excited to explore all of what's around, and St. Louisans are like, you moved here from Phoenix? Why? And I don't know if y'all have ever been to Phoenix, but this is not exactly like the metropolis that you want to claim. And I feel like there's so much about St. Louis that goes underappreciated. I've been so happy here. I'm now going on a decade plus. And I think this Times of London piece is a great example. He talked about how great the St. Louis Art, or she talked about how great the St. Louis Art Museum is. She even talked about how as she was walking from the Art Museum in the Central West, up into the Central West End to her hotel, she stayed at the Chase Park Plaza, that St. Louis felt as gentle as a village. And I thought, I do feel that when I'm walking in Forest Park at dusk. And yet, do you ever hear a St. Louis saying that in the comment section of any of our local publications?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Things are better here than St. Louisans want to admit.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because I've always thought that growing up here, that we have at once a superiority complex and an inferiority complex. We do sort of going at the same time. And what's really funny is those of us on social media, and that's probably everybody in the room, there was not you, I know, but he's probably the only man in the theater tonight who just had an iPhone. I mean, he just now purchased, he's very proud of his flip phone. But Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber was here as well and made the rounds and was talking about what a gorgeous, gorgeous city it is and how wonderful the people are, and the fact that maybe when you're in utopia, you don't see everything the way other people do, outsiders, so it's nice to have a reset, somebody telling us how good we've got it for a change.
Well, go ahead.
Speaking as another person without an iPhone, last weekend I was in Cincinnati, and I was there in 1981 because I was an intern at Cincinnati Enquirer. It's the first time I've been back to Cincinnati. And when I was in Cincinnati, when I was there, it's like, oh no, don't go over to Kentucky, Newport and Covington. Oh, it's rough. Don't go over there. They've transformed it. Okay, they made them. Now, one thing, they moved the airport over there. We don't have to beat that dead horse, but they moved the airport over there, and it really sparked revitalization there, and it really helped downtown Cincinnati. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cincinnati, but if anybody is, does anybody know what happened going into last weekend in Cincinnati? Okay, I'll tell you. We got there on Thursday, and a young man stole a car, and the police were chasing him. Incident happens, and the young man was shot and killed. On Saturday, the boy's father, distraught, ran over just a random police officer who was actually working the graduation at University of Cincinnati, just random. It led the news for 2 days, and that was it. And you would not have known all this tragedy was going on, okay? If that had happened in St. Louis, it just would have been dragged out, stomped on, played over and over and over again. We're right. We beat ourselves up for the things that happen in life, and we got to get over that. And so when you witness it, and you're just saying, like, and this all happened within the last week, and then this article comes out, and I'm just saying, like, he's right. He's right. There are terrible, awful things that go on, but that doesn't define us. And we got to stop doing it, or else we're not going to grow.
Well, reckless driving, you were speaking about driving, was a big, big issue for Kara Spencer when she was running for mayor of St. Louis. And Wendy, maybe I'll go to you on this one. The mayor, again, this week said that she wants to crack down on reckless driving. And in a story in St. Louis Magazine, it was also pointed out that she at one point had recommended a boot to be attached to the vehicles that are driving recklessly and endangering lives, and that people would not be able to drive the car home if they were driving recklessly. Do you think that's a good idea, whose time has come?
I do, because I think that whether you live in the county, Chesterfield, Miss Fenske, I didn't wear my pearls to clutch, so I'm going to have to. Joe is wearing a pearl bracelet. I'm going to have to clutch his pearl bracelet. But whether you live in the county or whether you live in the city, we've all had these experiences, and we've all seen these really reckless motorists. And I think that Kara Spencer has seen what happened to her. She has seen what happened to her predecessor. And if the perception is that if there's any lag time, then politically, there are going to be points taken. And so I am happy that she's giving these ideas some real heft and some teeth, and they are already going to some of the homes, the private homes of these people who are organizing some of these, I'm not sure what the events are called, strip rallies, slideshows, okay. Yeah. And she's, arresting them, so I'm good with it.
I think it's a great idea, but I don't like the idea of the donuts. When what you should do is arrest them and impound the vehicle. I don't think you can throw a donut on there. They haven't been convicted of anything. And we all know donuts get used. If you haven't paid parking tickets or you have outstanding tickets, they'll come by and they'll slap a donut on your car. But that's because you've already violated something. When you get pulled over, you're only under suspicion of. So arrest that person. And literally, it requires that we've turned away from sort of the strict enforcement of the rules. You've got people who are doing 90 miles an hour down a 30-mile-an-hour street in the city, turning donuts or pulling wheelies. Arrest them and impound their vehicle.
Yeah, but you impound the car, and they've been doing some of that in the city of St. Louis, and it's also reported this week that there are 568 vehicles at the city's tow lot which are not accounted for.
How many problems do you want me to solve here? One at a time, Charlie. One at a
time. You also have the fact that if somebody is pulled over, at least they're stopping. Right. I mean, we have we have a big problem where we have a no chase policy because we don't want these high-speed chases, but the young kids who are aware of the no chase policy, they'll often just take off.
Yeah. And I got to chime in on what Joe was saying here. This idea of there's not necessarily a due process if you're just taking away the vehicle. The tow lot is exactly the reason that we can't have a kind of no due process situation in the city. Have police be able to just impound your car without you being found guilty of anything, and then it ends up on a tow lot where 86 vehicles have gone missing. I'm connecting those dots in a different way than you just did, and it makes me alarmed.
Wasn't I the guy who said we shouldn't talk down St. Louis just a minute ago? What city has had like 3 tow lot scandals in the last 15 years?
And misplaced 600 cars.
And misplaced 600 cars. And wait, not to mention the $82,000 in cash that no one could account for. I need to work there. That's what I need to do.
Mayor Spencer is talking about treating these cars as a weapon, and I think she should.
Well, I think it's a return to you have to enforce the law. And for whatever reasons, and there's a variety of them, certain laws were just let go, especially during COVID. It's like, well, we'll let that slide. We'll let that slide. Your famous license plate tags. And it does go to the broken window theory. You have to write those tickets. You have to make people pay for those things. If they don't, they'll just keep pushing the edge of the envelope to see what they can get away with. So enforce all the laws. They're already on the books. They're not unfair. The solution to all this is people don't drive like idiots, and then you don't have a problem.
Joe, let me move from St. Louis to Eureka with you.
Yes.
Your paper profiled a woman who has a chicken coop in her backyard.
Yes.
Unfortunately, she didn't get permission from the homeowners association. The color of the coop doesn't match the color of her house, which is required by the HOA. It's also a little too large, and her entire yard is not surrounded by a fence to keep the chickens in. Right. So she's saying, that may be true. However, state law says that I am entitled to have a chicken coop, and that state law supersedes the homeowners association's regulations. Where are you coming down on this one?
I'm coming down on this as I wished I was an attorney because there are going to be more fees generated over this story than there should be.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm not a big fan of homeowners associations whatsoever.
No offense. No offense.
But I've got a feeling that this young lady with the chickens isn't exactly playing by the rules here either, where it's like, well, the state says I can have chickens. Yes, but that's all it says. You can have up to 6 chickens. But then homeowners associations can make restrictions. She didn't abide by any of those restrictions. So it's like, I don't know, what does she want, a 20-foot coop, 40-foot coop? I mean, you know, there's rules and there's rules. If you moved into a neighborhood with a homeowners association, I'm sure a bunch of attorneys will work this all out somewhere. I think this is one of those where I'm finding it hard to find a good side to this argument.
Well, the good chickens of Kirkwood had no water. Had no water today because we had a boil order. What was that about? All right. So you can have chickens in Kirkwood, all right? And you can have chickens in a lot of municipalities. But there are, like, some zoning things that go along with it. I like Joe. I can't stand HOAs. I would not live any place that had an HOA. However, but if you choose to live there, you do have to follow the rules. The chickens have to follow the rules. And, you know, and by the way, you're not, like, there was I guess a grandfather clause in the chicken Kirkwood law. And by now, every rooster that was alive at that time is probably in rooster heaven. But you will awake some mornings to hear roosters. And I don't think the Kirkwood police are going in search of who's got that rooster. So, yeah, we kind of break the rules, but look, you know, if you're going to have chickens, follow the chicken rules.
I'm going to argue with you on this. No, I have to take the side. I'm anti-chicken rule. No, the problem...
Just chickens everywhere. Chickens everywhere.
No, I think the problem is you find in this HOA that they've written the rules where nobody could possibly have 6 chickens. And the state law says you're allowed to have 6 chickens. And so the lawyer for this woman in this very good Post-Dispatch story is pointing out that the way this is written, if you have a coop that is as large as the law allows, you could never fit 6 chickens in there. So if I'm a lawyer, I'm saying this law is illegal. I'm taking this all the way to the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court,
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. They've got nothing to rule on these days, do they?
No chickens, no peace.
And you realize that's why lawyers are so popular, right? I mean, because I have probably one of your Kirkwood chickens in my crock pot at home right now. But what I thought was so fascinating is Joe said, the woman who was interviewed, the chicken woman, she admitted right up front, no, I'm not abiding by this rule. No, I'm not abiding by this rule. No, I'm not abiding by this rule. And I think that for the rest of us who try so hard to abide by rules, who wouldn't love an alpaca grazing in their front yard? But I can't because we have an HOA. And I think if you choose, as you said, if you live there, you have to follow the rules like everybody else.
Let me ask you this. The homeowners association in question has 3 members. One is a neighbor, and the other 2 are representatives of the developer, McBride Homes. And I don't know what that means, but I will say McBride is very successful at developing communities that people want to live in, and I think that they probably know what the vast majority of residents feel or think about chicken
No,
coops,
I would probably disagree with that. I would just say that, okay, golly, how do you say busybody? But you have one, yeah, you have one, and then 2 are with the McBride folks. I don't think that represents the entire community. They should have a chicken poll, and just determine, hey, are you all right with the chicken coop or not? And I think the chicken coop would probably pass muster.
Well, it's the roosters I keep getting back to. I know they get grandfathered in, but I can live next to somebody who has chickens and I wouldn't care. But a rooster next to me.
Yeah, that's going to be very unpopular.
No, in all honesty, when we moved back to Kirkwood in 1995, we had a rooster live next door, and he crowed at 6 a.m. every morning. It was like an alarm clock you didn't have to pay for.
Hey, speaking of real estate, Wendy, David Hoffmann is a big real estate magnate. He just recently, in Naples, Florida, purchased an $85 million home. He also bought a lot of property in Washington, Missouri, was going to turn it into the Napa Valley of the Midwest. That somehow has floundered. It's not going to happen anymore. But he owns a lot of property in Clayton and around the United States. He also is interested in owning the majority ownership of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's parent, Lee Enterprises. If you were a newspaper person, would you feel good about David Hoffmann being your boss?
Probably not too good right now, because his assertion that the wine country in East Central Missouri that they purchased was going downhill fast, or like bottoming out, I believe was the word that he used, the phrase that he used. It was bottoming out so quickly that we could never find a parking space. You know, any time that we went to the wine country, they decimated the trees at Montel. I'll never forgive them for that, because that was so beautiful sitting out on that deck. I would be concerned about his motives and his staying power, because so many of the things that he supported never materialized.
Well, as a newspaper person, if Mr. Hoffmann has plenty of money, I mean, if he really has deep, deep pockets, I'd love to see him come in and have a hometown guy with a lot of money running the paper. My concern is that he doesn't have all that money, and his plans, like in Augusta, Missouri, where he was going to have a 14-hole golf course. And I remember thinking, I don't play golf, but you have a 9-hole course or you have an 18-hole course. You know, a 14 plus, you know, I think that his kids, who are probably in their 50s and 60s and who grew up in Naples, Florida, aren't keen about spending the entire family money going home to Washington, Missouri, and spending money in Augusta, Missouri, and buying the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I just don't think it's a realistic plan. Yeah. If he had the money and wanted to come and buy the newspaper, I think it'd be a nice thing.
Well, you know, women and men make billions of dollars at whatever it is that they do, and then they buy a sports franchise. And they run it in the ground, and everybody's mad at the owner. He doesn't know anything about baseball. She doesn't know anything about football. And they're correct. And this is what I would see for the Hoffmans if they ended up with Lee Enterprises and some newspapers. They have no idea what they're doing, and the person at the very top who has no idea what they're doing, even though they own this business, they can surround themselves with people that know a lot. They won't listen to them. I think it would be a disaster bill. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Get Gannett on the phone, beg him to buy the St. Louis Post.
Maybe Mr. Hoffmann would be looking for some older columnist to kind of run things, Alvin. And there might be a position for you.
Well, no, I was going to say... You know, if he got an $85 million house, I'll take an $850,000 house to change my mind right now.
I will say what I would be concerned about is that he would offer you the $850,000 house and then not make good on it. Yeah. You know, this guy, he's run up bills around town, and we're talking like a $10,000 bill, just some small contractor. He doesn't pay it. They've had to take him to court. Like, that's going to be a problem in an industry like a newspaper.
Yeah. Do you think a little bit in this town, developers come in with grandiose plans, almost like Harold Hill and the Music Man? And as Mark Twain said, you can send a damn fool to St. Louis, but if you don't tell them that he's a damn fool, they'll never find out. And sometimes these people come in here and they got plans. I know this has happened in New York City as well with certain developers who talk big game, and for some reason we take them seriously, right?
Yeah, and we've had many instances. I don't know who the group was that was going to take over the music festivals in St. Louis and destroyed 3 of them and never did have one. That's the kind of thing we have to watch out for. And I'm really not comparing the Hoffmans to, you know, that fly-by-night outfit, but at the same time, they get a little to have that much money and to have that much baggage. I'm a little leery.
What do you think about a measure that, well, we have just a few days left, right, in the General Assembly's 2025 spring season. So don't know if this is going to happen or not, but they've been talking about open enrollment, Alvin. That would mean that, let's say, a family is in a school district and they don't like the schools that are available in that school district. If this law passes, they would then be able to go into go into a neighboring school district. Wouldn't have to be contiguous, could just be wherever, as long as that school district accepts them. Do you think that's a fair idea?
Well, it may be, but I'm always entertained kind of by the fact that every other year or every year this idea comes up down in Jefferson City and it gets 3/4 of the way down the path and then all of a sudden the brakes get put on it. And that's because a lot of districts, be it West County, be it South County, be it kind of rural Missouri, all of a sudden realize, say like open enrollment. Well, you know, we can't fill up all of our seats in our school right now, and we could use some other students. But the idea of those students coming from who knows where, and all they got to do is show up, and we take them, oh no, we're not going to have that. Now, everybody talks that good game about, oh, we got to help the students in the city or in places where schools are not performing up to standard. Oh, we got to help those kids, and then suddenly it's, well, we got to help those kids only so much. And it's just. I think it tells the truth how people feel about fairness in education.
Well, I think it's even more dangerous, too, because once a school district loses 5%, is always the plan, they can stop so that you can't pull every student out of one district to another. So what happens is that 5%, you end up losing your brightest students and your best athletes, who then shop around and go to different schools. So all you're doing is making the division between haves and have-nots even worse. And it also kills any sense of a community school. And we saw that even just within the small confines of the city of St. Louis. I remember Freeman Bosley Jr. when he was mayor, big critic of just the busing program in the city. He said there were no more room mothers at a school because there was, how are they going to get down to their kids' school when they're going 20 miles away? The neighborhood school went away. The neighborhood grade school went away. So I think this makes it even worse. And all you're going to do is serve the smart kids and the good athletes, and everybody will cherry pick those students out, and the districts, the division between the groups will get even worse.
Not Kirkwood.
And
you guys are already recruiting.
But in your heart of hearts, you know that whatever we're doing now is not working because you can go into I'm sure you've been into the Normandy schools. I was in there like 3 years ago, and unfortunately, the facilities were terrible. Now, my kids went to the Clayton schools, and so I've been able to compare and contrast. And in 2025, in one region, you should not have such a great disparity with resources. And it's almost impossible for many families, in fact, I think it is impossible, who might live in the Normandy school district to rent or to buy in Clayton. And what kind of a society has that as a system? Oh, you get a really good school with the air conditioning and all the other amenities if you've got money, but if you don't, you have a real bad situation.
Okay, but let's say the Hoffmans wanted to use their money for good and said like, all right, I'm gonna have a fleet of buses, all right, and I'm gonna load up kids from the city, and I'm gonna take them from Northwest High School to Clayton, and whatever the number of students that they would take, we're gonna get them there. They don't have to pay for the transportation, but it wouldn't work because the school districts themselves would balk. So, that's what the problem would be. And then also, if you're 48th in funding education, how about we fix that first before we start sending people over?
I think you've sparked something. Maybe Elon Musk will make Tesla school buses, right?
There we go.
You never know.
They can drive themselves,
That's
right?
right.
Well, the per student expenditure in the city of St. Louis is not really low by American standards. But let's say you have kids in the school district, you can't afford living in Kirkwood or Sunset Hills, and you're thinking to yourself, boy, I'd like to have a better gateway to prosperity. Why not take advantage of this? Especially when you read about some of the shenanigans with the St. Louis Public School administrators dining at 801 Chop House, and the buses don't show up, and it's a quagmire.
Look, I don't think the solution is let's bus kids all around there on a bus for an hour. We've had this talk about can we merge the county and the city. I personally not a fan of this. But what if we would just do one big school district and treat everybody the same? Now, thank you.
How does Kirkwood feel?
I get that Kirkwood and Clayton are not down with this plan, but if we want to talk about truly lifting up every kid, wouldn't that be the way to do it?
Would you have neighborhood schools?
Yeah.
Well, then you're still back where you were.
But, you know,
'Cause you have
same
neighborhood
per
schools
pupil
at Clayton,
expense,
you have
same
Kirkwood.
administration, same sort of like, let's give everybody the same shot, you know?
I'm not sure neighborhood schools are all that important. For example, in some high schools, the kids travel long distances to go to SLU High, right?
I think by
Or
high school
Loyola
is different. I think we're
Academy.
talking grade schools in
Yeah.
junior high. And I think it's crucial for those younger kids when the moms and dads can come and be room mothers, room fathers, and have events there at their school. But a lot of kids couldn't do extracurriculars because they had to take a 2-hour bus ride. I mean, the idea of a community school, yes, if you're going to opt to go to a private school, you already have certain means, and you opt for that to get a quality education. Nothing wrong with that. My parents sent me to Vianney High School, you know, but I mean, I think community schools are the key, and instead of moving pieces around the board, fix the pieces right where they're at.
And it helps the neighborhood. When I grew up in Chicago, it was everybody walked to school,
Yeah.
and the school, the grade school, was sort of the center of the community.
But you had bigger families then. Those feeder schools are not feeding anymore. That's another.
And I actually did not go to a neighborhood school, and I know Sarah didn't go to a neighborhood high school. Sometimes parents or buses are the way to get you there. I mean,
and in this area, just the kids that were part of the DSEC program, I don't think we ever honored them. I didn't live here at that time, but I don't think those kids were ever honored because there are some very, very successful men and women now that made that hour-long bus ride to and fro to Rockwood,
That's true.
Lindbergh, and all the places. And we never really stopped and said, like, you did it. Your family did it, and we should salute you. And, you know, did I mention that Kirkwood had a boil order? We're impoverished out there. Right,
Alvin.
Quit picking on us.
Speaking of schools, Michelle Munns of the Post-Dispatch had a piece on measles. Apparently there's 3 measles outbreaks, at least 3, in Missouri right now. And there was a guy from Southern Illinois who recently visited the aquarium. He has measles, so people are concerned about that. In her reporting, Michelle pointed out that even though it's required for entrance into kindergarten, just 75% of kindergartners in the city of St. Louis are vaccinated for measles. And you know, if a baby gets measles, that's a real problem because, well, you're not allowed to get a vaccination until you're 12 or 15 months old. So a lot of vulnerable people out there to this deadly problem. Do you think, in an attempt to make sure that people are vaccinated, someone dip into that Rams money and provide some cashola for families so that their kids will get vaccinated?
No, how about we get some, legitimate individuals in charge of health care in this country? We were vaccinated, all right. My generation was vaccinated. Everybody here was vaccinated, all right. Get vaccinated. We don't have to pay for that. And get your kids vaccinated, and they won't get measles. Now, I don't want to say that I don't feel for these people when they get the measles, because if you're a kid and your parents is whatever and you don't have vaccines, but at the same time, no, we're not paying for that. The society should not pay for that. You should not pay for people's just crass ignorance. I'm sorry.
And I think for the sake... Well, maybe I'll change my mind now. I think for the sake of the kids, you have to do whatever you can to get people vaccinated. And we can't depend on Bobby Kennedy urging people to do it. So I think we have to go ahead and say, hey, we'll give you a financial reason to get your kids vaccinated.
If your kid's not vaccinated, it's not Robert Kennedy's fault. It's not Donald Trump's fault. It's the parents' fault.
I agree.
That's it.
I agree.
Okay, so, I mean, let's put the blame where it lays. There's no government program that needs it. If you don't have your shots, you have a parent to blame, period. That's it.
Or guardian.
And we're going to pay him for that? Let's pay him for what, brushing their teeth? I mean, come on. I mean, you know.
Well, we're going to take fluoride out of the water, Joe, so maybe we will.
So let's let the government tell you everything you need to do to raise your child. How about a parent with common sense who makes their kid brush their teeth and get a vaccination?
All parents don't have common sense.
Well, you know, and so we're supposed to let the government then get involved.
No. We're supposed to help the parents do the right thing.
Okay, get a vaccination, parents, for your kids.
Well, I know that at my house, Robert Kennedy said drinking Windex shots would do the trick for everything. So that's what we're doing.
You guys I've been drinking Windex in Chesterfield for a long time.
That's true. That's true.
We had Windex coming out of the faucet this morning.
Was there a boil order?
The bear's gonna kill me.
By the way, speaking of Kirkwood, the owner of a legendary place, it's called the Sugar Shack.
Yes.
Bobby Francis is in the house tonight.
Hi, Bobby.
If you haven't been to the Sugar Shack, it's great. Her daughter, Gogo Connolly, is on the 9 PBS team. Bill, let's move to Rock Hill, where the city is now polling the residents, asking them if they can smell the marijuana coming from one of the manufacturing facilities in the Rock Hill Industrial Park. Do you think, as I do, that one of the unintended consequences of legalizing marijuana has been that just this area reeks of marijuana?
Well, I would not say it reeks. I would say there is a strong sense of community. As far as Rock Hill, that's a little different. You know, I always have sympathy for somebody who buys a home and then something new comes in there. You know, whether it's a store or a methadone clinic or whatever. And I think that if there is a strong odor of the marijuana plants at this industrial plant, I think that the city of Rock Hill is doing the right thing, asking the people what they feel.
Are there any houses for sale around the
I think the word we were looking for was aroma, not stink or reek. I think we were looking for aroma. And being a proud South Sider, some days the brewery could get awfully. And you know what? You just kind of lived with it and then had a beer. So, I mean...
Do you remember when Monsanto used to have fumes coming out
absolutely,
of Sauget?
Absolutely. I remember down on Alabama Avenue next to River de Pere, I remember driving by and we'd roll up the windows real quick and, you know, and you'd go by it. And I remember even complaining about it. And my dad would go, couple hundred jobs in there, son. And we just keep on going by. So.
That's how the good people of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where my mom is from, that was their reasoning. Because they had a paper mill there. And wow. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, make your eyes water.
But you guys passing the marijuana measure didn't tell us that, you know, you'll be walking down Hanley Road and every third car smells like marijuana.
Well,
so
but at the same,
not only are you smelling it, but these drivers are token while they're driving.
You don't care about that. You care about the temporary tags on the cars.
By the way, wait, and not to say that every other car, you know, got marijuana fumes coming out of it, but one, they did pay a tax. You know, for that right. And then two, getting back to Rock Hill, you know, the facility is there and it's coming out, whatever. I think that's one of the things where Rock Hill can make a, you know, deal, says like, look, you know, we can chase you out of town, or maybe you can pay a little bit more tax, or you can, like, you know, make a deal with the people that live around you.
That's right. I mean, you know, like a homeowners association.
That's right. Just no chicken. I know the mayor of Rock Hill. He is a close personal friend, Mayor Edward Mahan, and thank you for watching, Mayor. And I think we should all talk to him about a Taco Bell franchise. That's what I think, right?
I also think
they have one, by the way.
I also think it's when people go, well, now that you didn't realize when they passed the marijuana law that people would now be smoking in their cars. Passing the marijuana laws didn't cause people to smoke in their cars, okay? In fact, I think passing the marijuana laws didn't exponentially increase the use of marijuana. It just made a lot of lawbreakers legal, is what it did.
It seems to be rife now. Ubiquitous is the term I would use.
They're just trying not to hide it as much.
And anybody who's been to a dispensary will tell you everybody standing in line over the age of 65. Every single person.
Sarah, I want to ask you about Senator Josh Hawley, senior senator from the state of Missouri.
Hey, by the way,
hang on.
They're a very great angry mob tonight. Have you noticed that? They're the best angry mob we've ever had.
Did they have to bring pitchforks? We've talked in the past about Senator Hawley getting plaudits from the left side of the political spectrum for his work when it comes to Coldwater Creek and uranium and radiation remediation in North County. This week he did something that was rather quite astounding. He got 4 of his picks to be named to the federal bench in the Eastern District of Missouri here in St. Louis. 4 conservative young judges. who are now going to be on that bench for a long time unless they're elevated to the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, or whatever. Do you think a case could be made that right now he's the most effective, maybe most powerful person in Missouri?
You know, I'm not going to be the person to make that case, sorry to say. No, I think what he did is he was just completely stubborn, refused to even meet the Biden administration 1/3 of the way, and sometimes that works. You get your guy back into power, and then you look like a genius. That doesn't always work. This is not somebody who really knows how to form alliances. This is not somebody who's very popular with his own party. I think he got lucky on this. For all I know, these judges are great, but I am not about to credit him as being the genius who's getting things done.
Well, I blame this on Joe Biden. I mean, I can remember talking to Judge Rodney Sipple about when he was getting ready to retire and how they hadn't talked about naming anybody. It's the same thing with the U.S. Attorney. When Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden in 2020, Jeff Jensen resigned, and it was just assumed that the Democrats would name a new U.S. attorney. It's the way it's always done. And Biden did not get around to naming a new U.S. attorney. We still have Sawyer Fleming, who was left over, and didn't name any judge. And to say that, well, Josh Hawley maneuvered this, if Josh Hawley wouldn't go along with any of Biden's nominees, Biden should have just said, well, I'm going to just go public. Here's the people. Like for U.S. attorney, it was Gabe Gore and Reggie Lewis were the two names I heard. And you just go public with that and say, here's who I want, and make it an issue. Yeah. So I blame Joe Biden more than I credit anybody.
I think the lesson of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Dobbs, yep. I mean, I think that has probably been something that has created one of the biggest politically consulting shifts that we've seen lately in terms of importance and itemized, your itemized agenda.
Yeah, Josh Hawley, remember that?
I do.
Right, Josh Hawley. Right, and then they storming, rioting in the Capitol, and Josh Hawley running out the back. That's all I need to say about Josh Hawley.
The things that Josh Hawley has done, and we've talked about it on this show before. I've been on there talking about it. He has done as much as anybody for unions legislation for the last time, forcing companies to negotiate with unions over new contracts. I think what had happened is, and I understand it, if I listed all the things I wrote that were Josh Hawley initiatives, one, saying he's opposed to any cuts in Medicaid. If I took Josh Hawley's name off of it and put someone else's name on it, you would be applauding. But people don't like Josh Hawley. And I get that. But do you want someone you like failing on your behalf, or do you want someone you don't like succeeding on your behalf?
Popularity isn't the only barometer. Donald Trump is one of the most hated, reviled people in the United States, and he is the president. So Josh Hawley's career, as you're saying.
Well, the other thing too is the thing that seems to get ignored, especially when liberal-leaning people get together, is all of these people won with majorities of the vote. Yeah. They act like they got in on some technicality.
No, that's not true,
and they won. And Josh Hawley won
nobody disputes.
But I'm okay with people not liking Josh Hawley.
Nobody disputes how they won. But what's going on in this country right now is madness. And if you want to stand up against that, I mean, look, everybody won fair and square. Unlike 8 years ago or 4 years ago, when next thing you know we're rioting because somebody lost fair and square. So I mean, it's just, if people want to stand up and say, I don't like anything you're doing because I don't trust you and I think you got ulterior motives, I stand behind that.
But what you define as madness is not how more than half the country would define it.
No, I'm saying what has gone on since the election.
We'll have another election.
51% of Americans agree what's going on in America right now? I doubt that's serious.
Once Biden got elected, 51% of America didn't agree with him. 6 months after the election, nobody's more popular than on the day they're elected.
All right, and
we're going to have another
I know
election.
the day after he got elected, I wasn't worried about driving home tonight getting snatched off the street for what I just said on TV.
Have you made it home?
Okay.
Have you made it home every night?
Speaking of Republicans, and it turns out that Bill McClellan, Ed Martin, who he ran for Congress here, he ran for Attorney General, he was the head of the GOP party in the state of Missouri, he headed up the Eagle Forum under Phyllis Schlafly. Well, he was the nominee to be U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., and the president has yanked that nomination. Have we seen the last of Ed Martin?
No, we haven't. No. I mean, I know Ed, and he has this habit of falling up. I mean, just when you think that he's tumbling. And by the way, I mean, you're talking about Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley voted to confirm Ed Martin. And Josh Hawley has to know Ed. I know Ed Martin. I'm sure Josh Hawley knows him. So that tells you something about Josh Hawley, I think. But Ed, when Ed left St. Louis and went off to Virginia or Maryland and ran for county executive, and they called him a right-wing carpetbagger, and he got crushed, I thought that might be the end of Ed Martin. But he rises again. So I think he'll rise again.
As a reporter, I hope Ed Martin never goes away.
Well, he
just generates copy like crazy.
He is a good guy to have a beer with. And I remember how I met him. It was at a seminar about how to fire people without getting sued. And I went just to report on what companies were there, so I could say, hey, if you work for so-and-so, be careful. Yeah. And one of the first guys I met was Ed Martin, and I said, who do you work for, Ed? And he said, the Archdiocese. And in fact, back in those days, they had like a human rights division, and sure enough, Ed got rid of them.
I think Ed was on Donnybrook one time.
I think
he was.
Right?
He was.
And I think Ed being rejected by that group is like, the Symbionese Liberation Army rejected somebody because, hey, you're too radical for us.
Okay. Hey, we do want to set aside some time for your questions and comments from the audience, and so we have a couple of associates who are walking around with microphones. If you'd like to pose a question, raise your hand and we'll meander in your direction. Want to mention that Colleen Trappin from the STL Today and the Post-Dispatch is here with her mom, Ginny, and we want to recognize Colleen and Ginny wherever you might be.
Yes.
And
Bill from Rock Hill.
And Bill from Rock Hill is with us. Do we have a question or a comment?
Hi, my name is I'm a junior at Kirkwood High School and a news editor for the Kirkwood Call. I know that funding was recently cut for PBS, and I'm wondering how that will affect us in our education and what the community can do to protect our First Amendment rights.
Ain't they wonderful from Kirkwood?
There is a website that I think we can log on to if you want to get involved and preserve PBS funding from the federal government. And it's Protect My Public Media. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was on the call staff.
And we have Bill from Rock Hill. Bill?
I wasn't at the dispensary before I came here tonight, so. But I have smelled it. I noticed earlier when you talked about some of the latest problems in the city, particularly the bad driving and the problems that that's creating, there seemed to be something that was left out, and that is the need for more law enforcement that unfortunately boots, speed bumps, traffic light cameras, security cameras, they can't make arrests. And I just think, how do you feel about the need of more actual police officers in the city on the streets? And by the way, full disclosure, I am a civilian member of Backstoppers.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
We've mentioned this before. We used to have 1,600 uniformed police officers in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Now we're down to about 850. And it is true that population has gone down, but not that much. Not only would I like to see more uniformed police officers, but I'd like to see 2 of them per patrol car, which I see in some other cities.
Yes.
This is another Kirkwoodian. He's Gig Gwynn, who, ladies and gentlemen, has been to 320 countries. I didn't even know there were that many. But go ahead, Gig.
Can't find it.
We got a hot mic here, Charlie. It's vacation time in St. Louis, and we're fortunate enough in St. Louis to still have an airport big enough to get you almost anywhere in 24 hours in the world. I'm curious, is any member of the panel going on any interesting trips this summer?
Good question.
I'm not.
My husband, for some reason, is insisting on a Bourbon Trail trip. We have been married for almost 38 years, so I think it might have something to do with that.
I'm going to be on the Bourbon Trail at the reception after this.
Joe just got back from Scotland and England, correct?
Yep.
How'd you fly?
Were your arms
White
tired?
knuckled. Through Lambert to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to Heathrow. So
that's a good airport, Minneapolis.
So yeah.
Unlike ours.
So I don't have a good airport answer here, but I do want to say my 9-year-old daughter Cecilia is here at her first Donnybash. Yes. It's a long-held dream of mine that at some point I can get her to watch the show and see her own mother on TV. So maybe tonight she'll get hooked. But I bring this up to say every summer my family has to go to northern Wisconsin because that's where Cecilia gets to see her cousins. So.
And I think we're probably going to stay home and maybe go camping near that Rock Hill facility.
We have another question before we get to that. Bill, I don't know if you knew this, but I found out this afternoon at the reception before this broadcast that the Sheldon's executive director is John, check that, Pete Palumbo, whose grandfather was lobbyist John Britton.
Oh my gosh, I am a big John Britton fan, and I used to write that the governor was the second most important man in Jefferson City, and John Britton, he got stuff passed that you wouldn't believe. I mean, and not always good. I mean, but the reasons people could drive around with an open container of beer was John Britton. He was a lobbyist for the brewery, and he said that he used the peanut butter sandwich defense. If you can drive while you're eating a peanut butter sandwich, you ought to be able to drive while you're having a beer. And the legislators would listen to him, and they would say, "Mr. Britton, you have a good point." He was great. He was great.
When he retired, AB named a Clydesdale after him.
Did they?
They really did.
Wow.
And he didn't drink, which was kind of unusual.
And a matter of fact, he smoked, and when they stopped smoking in the Capitol at Jefferson City, they had a John Britton exemption. I mean, that's when you know you got the right lobbyist.
So, okay, and we want to thank Pete and the team here at the Sheldon. We have another question somewhere in the audience. From the older woman herself.
Yes.
Alicia Saunier. Do we have a microphone? Second row.
He's coming.
Or
I think he's got to come all the way around. Here he comes. There you go.
by the way, also Dennis Sparger, who is the head of the Bach Society, is with us in the house tonight. Saw Dennis at the reception. I'm sorry, Alderman.
Okay. First, I just want you all to know I am a big fan, and I watch all the time for many years. So my question, you guys talked a lot about education, and we also are talking a lot about the city-county merger and what that looks like. And so my question is, what are you all's positions on possibly a joint project of a special school district? We don't have one in the city of St. Louis. Many people leave when they have special needs, and the city actually has to pay for any children who we have to send to other districts to get their needs met. And I think if everyone's going to talk about the city-county merger, picking a need that our children have and an educational need might be an idea.
It's funny you mention that. Yeah. We have a panelist, Jason Rosenbaum, who said that he moved out of the city for that very reason.
Yeah. So I want to say, I think that's a great question, and it was about 4.5 years ago when Tashara Jones and Kara Spencer and Louis Reid were all running for mayor the last time around. That was a question we asked all the candidates. Would you support extending this county special school district to the city? They all said yes. And guess how much progress was made in the last 4 years? None. So supposedly people are in favor of this, but I get there's a lot of other things.
Yeah, my wife's career is in special education, and she started with severe and profound students, but got another degree in vision impaired. But she worked for a special school district of St. Louis County for 22 years. I didn't know until she had worked there like 10 years that it wasn't the same in the city. And I agree with you that it's because it works so well, and I know that there's budget stuff, and there's all kind of St. Louis County Special School District, whatever, but the idea that the county has that and the city doesn't is one thing that I think could be fixed if the effort were put forth.
I know that there have been some stories about the administrative level.
Yeah.
We've got to resolve all of those issues
Right.
because the kids deserve
Right, but the
best.
teachers working with kids is an everyday thing.
A minute to go. Let's see if we can sneak in one more quick, pithy question or comment. Yes.
Well, thank you all. This is probably my 12th time here at Donnybash.
I thought you were going to say your last time.
Don't tempt me, Alvin, please. I just want to acknowledge the fact you were talking about the new Pope, and your former head of the Channel 9 was Jack Gelmich. Jack was also a graduate of Augustinian Academy. So in his honor, I'd like to say that. Thank you.
Like a neatly woven quilt, our show with no seams from beginning to end.
There we go.
Thank you very much. And that's all she wrote for Donnybash 2025. I don't know who she is, but thank you very much for joining us and for your support for 9PBS.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.